Okay, the next section of the book is about freezing rows and columns. I'm choosing to do this particular task as a separate video because I think it's such an important thing to understand, and the text really only shows you in about a half a page, and it is probably one of the most useful tools. I use it very often. It's very useful when you have a very large spreadsheet with labels that are shown on let's say a row, and as you're scrolling down the information you can see that that row with the labels disappears off the screen, and now what is column C? I'm not exactly sure. So I'd really rather that label to always be there, and as I'm scrolling to keep that label visible for me. And so the way to do that is to use the freeze pane options. So I'm going to do it very quickly here so you can see what happens, and then we'll talk through the actual steps that I went through. So select it. I'm going to select my cell A6. I'm going to go to the View option. I'm going to select my freeze panes, which is on the ribbon. I'm going to keep the freeze panes option here. We'll discuss what each of these are separately, but I'm going to freeze the panes. And notice I've got this line. Do you see it that shows up there? What that tells me is as I'm scrolling, notice that anything above that cell that I had active will stay frozen. It will never move. And then as I scroll down, I can see the labels, and they will stay there at all times. So that's really how quick it is to freeze the panes. Now to turn that off, we're going to go back into freeze panes. I know it's on, so I'm going to select the unfreeze panes. Now it's turned off. Notice that rows 1 through 5 are moving. So let's explain a little bit about what those other options are. I'm going to purposely select a different active cell, and let's go to B5, for example, this high temperature column label, and let's go to freeze panes. If I click on this freeze pane, look at what the little picture here is showing me. It's saying the active cell is in blue, and it's going to freeze the columns and rows that are highlighted in that dashed blue little symbol. So given that, any row above where my active cell is, so row 4 and above, and any column to the left of my active cell, column A, will stay frozen. So let's go ahead and freeze it, and you can see what happens. Look, I've got my little helper lines that are showing me what's going on. So as I scroll, that's great, or that's not great here because I've lost my labels. I should have been down in column in cell B6, so you have to be careful with where your active cell is when you're using that freeze pane activity or that freeze pane option. But as I scroll to the left and right, notice that column A is frozen as well. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the freeze panes, and I'm going to unfreeze it one more time. And now let's talk about what the other options do. So freeze my top row. Again, just freezes row 1. I'm going to unfreeze that. Freeze the first column. We'll freeze column A. So if you know your first row has only labels and you want to use it that way, you certainly could use those other options, or if column A has it. So let's go ahead and unfreeze those panes and do it one more time. So we're going to go and select B6 this time around. I'm going to select freeze panes, select that first item. Notice I've got my helper lines here again, and it will freeze any row above my active cell, which is B6, and any column to the left of my active cell, in this case A. So we're going to scroll down and notice that anything above my active cell B6 is frozen, and as I scroll to the left, my column stays frozen too. So the freeze columns and rows is an excellent thing to know, and can be used whether you have a table or not. So I'm going to unfreeze that, and we're going to go back and continue on with our next video.